Today's video is made possible by Bora Portamate. Welcome to the shop, friends. Come on in for the 2020 shop tour. So you guys are actually standing right in the man door on the western side of the shop. I'm thankful to have a man door so I can keep the garage door shut most of the time. That keeps the humidity down quite a bit in the shop. So the building my shop is in is 2 stories tall and it's 24 by 24 foot exterior dimensions. The walls are 8 inches thick. This is an 80-year-old building. It was built sometime around 1938. You account for the wall thickness and also a 3-foot stairwell on the western side of the shop. That leaves me about 430 square foot for shop space. So let's start here on the northern wall. That's the wall that has my 2 garage doors. So between the garage doors, I have my DeWalt 735 planer. This has been a really nice planer for the shop. It has a fairly small footprint as it's really designed to be a benchtop planer. I did add the DeWalt mobile base for it, and that's been really nice because you can move it and clean underneath it. So this planer gives you about 12.5 to 13 inches of width, and I think it goes up to 5.5, maybe even 6 inches in height in terms of the amount of material or the size of material that can go through the planer. Planer like this makes a lot of shavings and dust. So I added a trash can collection system to it. Unfortunately, the top here the hoses connect to doesn't seal very tightly, and this planer actually has a fan that blows those chips out with a lot of force, and a lot of times those chips actually shoot out from the edges of the trash can lid. And then the trash can is attached to a 4-inch dust hose. I think you could certainly make a good argument that this is one of the best benchtop planers that you can buy. So I recently added a dehumidifier to the shop. I'm trying to keep the humidity in my shop somewhere around 45 to 50%. It's definitely a challenge in a building like this. It's not sealed up real well. But the dehumidifier is doing a pretty good job. Right now we're at 52% relative humidity and the temperature in here is 76 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll be sure to put a link to the majority of the tools that I have here in the shop in the description. That way if you're wanting to look at those specific tools, it'll be easy for you to find them. So now let's go ahead and move on over to the eastern wall. The eastern wall is where I have the majority of my French cleat tool wall, and I also have my miter saw, my sharpening station, and my treadle lathe. Come on over and let me show you. So I'm still using the DeWalt FlexVolt system. I'm using that for both my miter saw and my table saw. The reason that I'm using the FlexVolt system is that I purchased these tools quite a bit before I actually developed my workshop. And to be honest with you, they work so well that I haven't had a reason to change them to a corded tool. Now I will say that this tool, the miter saw, has a corded attachment that you can use, but I really haven't found a reason to do that. And I'm also fairly limited on plugs in my shop, so I still use the batteries. The DeWalt compound miter saw uses 2 60 volt or FlexVolt batteries, and I just keep them on the chargers when I'm not using the saw. And then when I come out to the shop, I just go ahead and throw the batteries on the saw, and I can go pretty much all day long without recharging. A lot of people over the years have asked why I chose to go with a battery powered miter and table saw, and at the time we were doing a lot of renovations around our property, so it was really nice having battery powered saws that you didn't have to carry an extension cord around with. So I really like the battery powered saws. I'm sure that there is some limitations with them, but for me, I haven't found them so far. So you'll notice attached to my miter saw is the Russo 5000. This is sort of a tent system that connects into my dust collection. It actually has a 4-inch attachment. I don't think my dust collector has enough power to truly get that dust from the tent over to my dust collector. I can say it definitely reduces the amount of sawdust in the air in my shop, and it keeps it relatively contained here so it's easy to clean up. So behind the miter saw on the French cleat tool wall is the pipe clamps. I don't use them really all that often, but when I need them, they're really handy. You can really get a lot of clamping pressure out of pipe clamps. They're a fairly economical way of getting really long clamps. And some of the projects I've used those on would be some of the cabinetry projects I've done for the French cleat tool wall, my workbench I built, and also the treadle lathe where you're trying to get all that joinery together. So also behind the miter saw is my circular saw storage cabinet. I've got my DeWalt and my skill saw stored here, and then underneath those is the saw blades. So just in case you missed it, I did make a video of building the circular saw cabinet. So one of my most recent projects on the channel is building the sharpening station. And I've got my work sharpener here. I've got all the discs stored beside it. And then underneath that I've got a drawer that stores most of those sharpening accessories. And I've got my diamond plates as well. My diamond stones here that I can move over and use on the workbench whenever I want to do that. So the top of the cabinet has sort of become where I store my camera, batteries, and accessories. So above the sharpening station is where I store some of my power tools. I just built this simple holder to hold some of the odd shaped tools. So on this tool holder I have my jigsaw, I have some brad nailers, I have my nail remover. I'll tell you a quick story about the DeWalt framing nailer I have. I was building the shed out back and it got jammed up and we couldn't get it unjammed. And I contacted DeWalt and they told me to send it down to their Atlanta factory. And about 2 weeks later I got it in the mail, all repaired, free of charge. It's really nice when a company like DeWalt, for example, you know, warranties their tools and will repair them when they break. So here on this cabinet I've got my finishes, I've got some of the oils, I've got some different glues, like some of my leatherworking glues, and then some spray paint and just odds and ends that need to be stored out of the way. Perhaps one of the biggest projects I've done here on the YouTube channel is the Treadle Lathe. This project was a lot of fun, but it was also a lot of work because I built it completely with hand tools. It really helped me develop some hand tool skills that I otherwise probably wouldn't get. This project was really inspired by Mr. Chickadee, which is one of my favorite YouTube channels. And the design was a little bit similar to the one he built with some minor modifications. Believe it or not, you can actually get the drive shaft of this treadle lathe up to about 1200 RPM. Above the treadle lathe here, I've got various tool holders. I've got my hammers, I've got some bar clamps, I have some different sanding jigs and things I've made. And then I've also got my hand drills and my hand saws over on this side. So here in the middle of my shop is my Paul Steller's workbench. This is kind of the centerpiece of the channel. This is where I do most of my filming. I did build this workbench completely with hand tools, and that's where I learned a lot about using hand tools building this project. So if you saw the 2 trailers I posted on YouTube, then also a lot of the behind the scenes footage I put on Instagram recently, you'll know that I'm building an acoustic guitar. And I'm not going to show you very much of it today because I want you to watch the upcoming videos. But I do have the back of the guitar completed, and it's built out of Indian rosewood, and it's got spruce braces. This project is using all of my brain power, and I'm doing a lot more research and studying than I am actually building. In the corner here is my wood stove, and I also have an Air King fan. So I don't have any heating or cooling in my wood shop other than these 2 fixtures. I really like the wood stove. It just really creates an environment that I like to be in the winter time. And then the fan does okay. I mean, it circulates some air. It also blows around a lot of dust. But I can usually keep the shop in the summertime between 75 and 80 degrees. And in the winter time it generally stays around 60 degrees. So now let's move on to the south wall of the shop. This is probably the area of the shop that you see the most in videos because it's behind my workbench. I have my hand plane till that I built out of pallet wood, and that was a really fun project, and we did a whole build series on that. I've got a handful of hand planes here. I've got a Stanley joining plane. I do have the 2 modern Sweetheart planes that Stanley made. Really like those. I have a Stanley number 3 that was given to me by a family member that's really a plane that I cherish. And then I've got a variety of other planes as well, specialty planes and such. So this is most definitely the smallest plane I've ever used. It's called a thumb plane, and it's used for building acoustic guitars when you're shaping the braces. So you'll be seeing this on an upcoming video. So I don't think I've ever really talked about the workbench that's attached to the south wall of my shop. I built it before I started making YouTube videos, but it's made out of just construction grade pine, and it's actually attached to the wall. It doesn't have any legs or anything attached to the floor. And you can see by the equipment that's on the table, it's super, super strong. Built it off of a set of plans that I found online. I'll try to find those plans and put them in the description of the video. I think it's a small fee to buy the plans, but it's a really nice workbench. It looks really good, and as you can see, it's super strong. So on the workbench, I have the jet belt and disc sander. I haven't had this sander too long, but it's really made building the acoustic guitar much easier. Shaping all the pieces for the guitar would require a lot of work using solely hand tools. And this tool is made the process much easier. The next tool on my workbench is the Wind spindle sander. This is not a real expensive tool, which is nice. And what I like about it is the spindle is very square to the bed of the tool, which is really important for a spindle sander because you're using it to try to get your material to a 90 degrees to the bed of the tool. It's really handy for shaping curves. So I'm really using it right now for shaping the mold of the guitar. It's obviously curved like a guitar shape, so it's really important for the spindle to be a 90-degree angle to the bed of the tool. So this is a 16-inch Craftsman scroll saw. It was given to me several years ago, and I dug it out of the basement and found a spot for it here. I've got to get it restored and get it working. I think it'll be a handy tool for doing some inlay work. So the last two power tools on my workbench is the 8-inch jet bench grinder, and it's got Norton sharpening wheels, which are really nice. They're designed to not create a lot of heat when they're grinding your sharpening tools to shape. And then I've got the Central Machinery 5-speed bench drill press, and I recently built a drill press table for it, which is really handy. A lot of people have asked what the wood material is that I used on the back wall of the shop. And this is tongue and groove pine. So I put that on the wall, and then I added my cabinets and all my tool holders and things to that. On the back wall, I've got some shelving here that just holds books and glues and odds and ends. So then also on the wall back here, I have my chisels and screwdrivers, and I have some carving tools. These are made by Narex. Narex makes some really well-priced tools. They seem to be quite high quality as well. Something else I've added to the shop in the past year is these magnetic strips. And these are really handy just to get some of those odds and ends off of your workbenches. Places that don't really have a home, but you can just attach them to those magnetic strips and keep them up off the workbenches and out of your way. Since they're on a magnetic strip and they're very visible, they're easy to find when you need them. So underneath the workbench, I built a drawer, and I'm using foam to organize my leatherworking tools. It's a pretty neat way of organizing your drawers. So the newest power tool that I've added to my workshop is the Jet 2244 drum sander. This thing is really a beast. It's probably more of a drum sander than I needed, but I really was looking for the width. So as the name implies, the drum sander is has a sanding drum, and that varies from the planer. The planer uses blades to dimension the material. Thicknessing a material that probably the planer would destroy if you tried to get it really thin. For example, building the acoustic guitar, I'm going to be bringing down the top, back, and sides to less than 1/8 of an inch. So trying to do that on the planer, I would more than likely destroy it. You'll be seeing a lot more of the drum sander through our upcoming projects. So here I have my Craftsman bandsaw. This saw was given to me by a friend several years ago, and I would love to have a bigger bandsaw, but honestly it just continues to do exactly what I need it to do, and for now it's serving its purpose without any difficulty. I do have it connected to a 4-inch dust hose. Behind the bandsaw is this dust manifold I built, and it's essentially just a box that has attached to it 4 different blast gates, and then those blast gates connect to different dust hoses that goes to each one of my machines. And then the hose at the top connects into the main dust hose that goes to my dust collection system. If I had it to do over again, I would have made the front of it like plexiglass or something where I could see through it. That way I could tell if there was any dust clogs or anything in there. Plus it'd be really cool just to watch the dust sort of shooting up through the hoses. So now we're back to the eastern wall, and this is where I have my router table. I built the router cabinet probably 10 or more years ago, and I had originally built a table for it. The table was okay, but it wasn't super flat, and I felt like it could be improved upon. So I think 2 years ago I bought the correct router tabletop, and it's been really nice. So the cabinet is pretty nice. It's got a place where I can store my router bits and then just kind of odds and ends that I want to get out of sight. And then the Craig router tabletop is super flat, which is nice, and then it's got a movable fence. And one of the best things about this is I've got a 2-inch hose connected to the fence, and then I've got a 4-inch hose connected to the cabinet itself. So it does collect the majority of dust that's created by the router. On the eastern wall, I've got more French cleat holders. I've got just shelves for my batteries. I've got some shelving for sanding disc. I built this drill bit holder maybe last year. It's really nice to organize your bits where you can, number one, see them, and number two, just sort of know where to find them. But it is probably a little bit dangerous if you were to fall. It might spear you, so I have to always be cognizant that those bits are on the wall. And then moving on, I've got some cabinets here for my belt sander, and then also my power drills and batteries. And then above that, I have some holders just for lumber storage. I like to bring lumber in a few weeks before I'm going to use it so it can kind of acclimate to the shop, and that's usually where I put it. So I'm still using the DeWalt 60 volt miter saw. I have it sort of in the center of the shop. That way I can still get pretty big pieces of plywood through it. And then here, just past the miter saw, is my Outfeed Table. And it also really sort of serves as a place where I can do assembly as well. And to be honest with you, it just sort of catches all sorts of odds and ends that I don't know what to do with. I think it makes using the miter saw much, much safer to have an Outfeed Table to support the material as it comes through the saw. Right now, since I'm building a guitar, I have two different fixtures here that are fairly specific to building a acoustic guitar. Here I have a bending jig for bending the sides of the guitar, and I'll be showing that off to you in an upcoming video. And then here I have a go bar deck, and this is a lutherie specific tool. It uses fiberglass rods to clamp material against the base of the jig up against the top of the jig, and it'll make a lot more sense in upcoming videos when I show you how that works. If you'd like to see kind of how that works before, head over to Instagram, and I've got some behind the scenes video there of using the go bar deck. It's a really cool system. And I bet it can be adapted to other things as well, not just guitar building. If it's been around for a while, you'll know that I've milled up a ton of pallet wood last year, and I still have a lot of it for upcoming projects, but I have oak, cherry, poplar, pine. It's amazing what type of wood ends up in those pallets, and if you pick through them and you look carefully, you can really find some super valuable material. These have all been dimensioned and squared up and flattened with a planer and using the table saw and everything. So these are all ready for use in whatever projects I decide to use them for. I really like these DeWalt organizers for screws and nails and all sorts of bolts and things. I just have them stored underneath my Outfeed Table here for whenever I need to use them. I wish I had more space for these. I really like these. I'd like to have probably about 6 or 8 of these, and just have all the different hardware and things that I use in the shop all organized. One struggle that I think most of us have in small shops is not knowing what to do with scrap material. And I just got a big bucket here underneath my table saw where I put some of those scraps. So if you're doing a lot of woodworking, you're gonna want dust collection in your shop. It's just a must. What I did was I used 4-inch sewer pipe, and I've got these PowerTech blast gates. Then those are connected to the flexible hose. And these blast gates are probably not the nicest thing in the world, but they do work. They are kind of fragile, and some of them have broken over time, and I've repaired them with duct tape. But I think it does work pretty well. I did make a few mistakes when I designed my dust collection system. One of the mistakes I made is some of the pipes come straight down from the main dust chute, and that allows dust that's going through the pipe to fall down into these. Ideally, this pipe would come off at an angle and then come down, and that would prevent dust from wanting to fall down in here when it's coming from, farther away from the actual dust collector. So here on the eastern wall, there's a small closet, and that's where I keep my dust collector. And I have it connected to a Long Ranger 3, which is a remote start for it. That way, when I'm all around the shop and things, I can just turn it on using that remote control. So now let's head around back, and I'm going to show you the woodshed. If you have space constraints and temporarily need to expand your work area outside your shop, you might want to consider the Portamate Speed Horses. These sawhorses set up easily and quickly, are heavy duty and rated to 1,500 pounds per speed horse. They They're designed for the attachment of sacrificial 2x4s to avoid damage to the sawhorses or your saw blades. In addition, they're designed to hold a full 4x8 sheet of plywood to serve as a work surface. I'll place a link in the description if you want to check them out. So this is my wood shed that attaches to the back of my shop building. It's 16 foot long and 24 foot wide. This is where I store my lumber before I'm ready to use it. I've got a big stack of walnut here that I milled several years ago that's been drying. And then I've also got this workbench area that I'm using to cut plywood, to cut big pieces of plywood with. What I like about this is that I can back my truck right up to this little work area, slide the plywood over onto this, and then I can use my Craig AccuCut system with my DeWalt skill saw to cut those pieces of plywood into manageable pieces before I take them inside and cut them on the table saw. This is where my wood stove penetrates through the wall of the building, and then this is the clean out area, and then that pipe goes up through the roof. Here on these racks I've got pine, heart pine, cedar, oak, lots of different types of woods here that are drying. Then here on the back wall of the shed I've got my garden tools and just some other odds and ends for storage. I'm kind of kicking around the idea of putting my dust collector here in the shed and then just penetrating the side of the shop with a 4-inch pipe. That would make it so much easier to clean out the dust from the dust collector without really getting it all over the shop. That concludes today's shop tour. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.